we've worked with organizations that have had a real focus on driving efficiency in a major cost, which might be customer services. So you can see you've got a call center of, let's say 500 people, and you can lower their average call handling time by like 1 minute. For every call that those 500 people are handling, you're saving like 500 minutes for every like call cycle that you might have in a day. And so that winds up being an absolutely massive factor, by the way. This is truly in the several millions of dollars per year for these organizations that can have a successful deployment of that type of solution. Hi, welcome to Deliver Next. I'm your host and head of AI at HSO, Fraser Paine, and today I'm discussing with our marketing manager, Nathan Bregmen, the AI to ROI pipeline, how you can find the right opportunities and how to make them work for your business. We discuss the cases in which AI is totally overkill and unnecessary to a solution, and the counterpoint of the most exciting AI applications we've seen out there in industry today that are really transforming businesses and driving ROI, not just in cost savings, but also in expanding revenue or opening up whole new opportunities to deliver value. If you're a business leader looking to add AI to your operation, this isn't one to miss.
So everyone's in a race to adopt AI these days, but a lot of businesses are approaching it like a hammer looking for a nail. What's your approach to this problem, and how do you think you differ from maybe what the status quo is at the moment?
I would say it's worse than a hammer looking for a nail. I think what we're seeing is a lot of places trying to use a bazooka instead of a fly swat. Like it's way overkill.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really easy to understand why that is if you just think about everything bad about AI. And I say this as someone who uses it absolutely every day and has made my living off it for a decade. I'm not here to slam on AI, but if you do frame it by its negatives, you really easily rule it out from a lot of applications. So for a start, it's expensive, right? There's a reason NVIDIA is a $4 trillion company. It costs a lot more to run these programs than it does to run a simple if statement. If you can write a couple of lines of code to do something, you should do that instead of calling out to an AI model. Mm-hmm. It adds randomness to the process. So we describe these models as stochastic or semi-stochastic. They introduce some amounts of randomness. They don't do exactly the same thing every time you ask them, even if you ask it the same question. And so what you're really seeing is like we're increasing cost to reduce reliability. And you'd ask like, well, why would I ever use it then? That sounds like the worst technology ever. Mm-hmm. And it's because it simply does things that you could not write into code. And it's worth taking that little bit of accuracy and that little bit of inconsistency to do completely new things, because fundamentally that's how humans work. We are not simple lines of code and if statements. We are a little bit random. We do things inconsistently, but we can do a lot more than a basic computer can. So once you filter out all of those things that should not be AI, you're left with a subset of things that could be AI. And then you can apply, I guess, the other side of the filter is what is AI not ready to do yet? So what's it not capable of that a human might be? And I think once you apply both of those filters on the bottom end, what shouldn't be AI, and on the top end, what can AI not do yet? You're left with a slice in the middle, which are like the more interesting projects to take a stab at.
Right. So people are applying AI to everything. Regardless of just every problem. Oh, AI could possibly do that, and maybe it can, but it's more expensive than other things, solutions that already exist.
Yeah.
Or they're trying to get through something that's just not. It's not the best solution for.
Well, to give a concrete example, there was someone posting, they were saying like our AI bill's gotten out of hand. We're paying $1,200 a month for like OpenAI credits, and they were a very small business. And it was primarily being used to like screen for profanity, ensure that things were structured according to a style guide that like they had capital letters in the right place, or pass phone numbers out of inputs and put that into like a structured kind of JSON record. So it was like structuring some data, parsing some things, adding some filters. And the really funny thing was like they asked an AI to write a script that does this stuff. And it's like you can quite literally write a regex expression that pulls the phone number out. Or you can, have a blacklist for profanity filtering that just has every swear word in it. You switch everything to lowercase so it's easier to match, and you just detect all the swear words and rule that stuff out. And so they introduced that, and it was like by asking ChatGPT basically 3 or 4 questions to write a little bit of code to replace itself, it could write scripts that performed 95 to 99% as accurately as the LLM was. And it's quite literally free. Like I'm not even overstating it. It's like it's a script that's so small you can run it on like a Raspberry Pi, tiny $100 computer in the server room corner kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's it's pretty night and day between these things. I think that analogy, like a bazooka to kill a fly, is pretty well stated in a lot of use cases. But on the flip side, like you simply can't write a script that analyzes a complex legal document, right? And you can't write a script that parses complex structured documents into JSON. So that data extraction pattern from OCR is actually really, really challenging if it's a complex structured document with tables and names, and people are, writing invoice NO, invoice number, invoice num hash, all of these different codes for it. Then it becomes really hard to write a regular expression that hits all of those points, and you're playing whack-a-mole with errors, and just simply asking an LLM to, hey, use structured outputs, pass this to JSON, just works. Mm-hmm. And there's a value in things just working. Like if you're only running it a couple of thousand times a month, then it's cheap as chips to run on AI. It's like, it's worth spending those $10 to just not have the problem where you're fiddling with regex all the time.
Yeah. Do you think this is part of just the situation we're in, and there being a paradigm shift and it being such a new technology that we're just not really familiar with, like, the landscape of what this tool is capable of and what it's good at? And so we're kind of falling back to our old frameworks, and the things that we used to use other things for, we're like, oh, we'll apply this to that, when really it needs a whole new kind of way of looking at things.
Yeah, I mean, it gets a little philosophical, but there's a whole thing of the first thing you do with a new medium is try to elevate the old medium, right? So there was this whole thing about, when you get the internet, the first thing you try to do is put TV and the radio on it, and then newspapers, and then it's literally just the old media first comes in, and then over time you realize, well, actually, the like revolutionary thing about this is everyone has a two-way connection, not just a one-way media feeds out to the user. And then things like YouTube pop up and social media pops up, and these whole new dynamics of like what the internet is today is very largely not old media. Like it is an evolution of media.
It's not just bulletin boards.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we'll see exactly the same thing with AI, where today it's automate these paperwork processes, automate this, automate that. And it's like, at the end of the day, is it AI agents that talk to one another and we never do that task again? And why is it even a paper document? Or instead of automating the ingestion of paper documents, why don't we have an AI write an interface to have you fill out a form and apply all of these things? Or better yet, bring back phone lines. You call up and it parses all of your phone conversation into filling out the form, but it also asks you follow-up questions, right? So it narrows down on, hey, you've underspecified, or I've actually checked and you won't be eligible for this thing you're applying for unless this applies. And the human gets that feedback immediately. Instead of waiting 10 days for their application to be processed, they get that feedback in the conversation, and that tightens up the application loop. So it's like better customer experience, less overhead, less workload, all of these things improve.
Right. So while you also need to understand the process that you're applying it to, there's also potentially new processes that opens up that you actually need to think about and imaginate in order to make the most of the AI.
Yeah.
Cool. I noticed a lot of businesses, their first go-to is cutting costs, and it seems like the most obvious solution. I guess it's something that we're wired to quite easily think about. But I've heard you often advocating for increasing revenue over cutting costs, or as well as. Do you want to talk a bit more about what you mean by that and how you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, the simplest way to look at it, right? There's only two ways to increase profits. And when we talk about ROI, the return we want to see on our investment is profit. So you can increase top line revenue, or you can lower bottom line costs. They're the only things that are going to widen that gap and increase your profit margin. So if we look at that, the simplest one to calculate, and maybe this is why people default to it, is how do we cut costs? Lowering that bottom line margin is like, you can very easily say, I've got 500 staff that do this half-hour task every day. So they're doing it for 2.5 hours a week times my 500 staff. And you kind of calculate that out very quickly. It's actually not super difficult to come to this conclusion that, hey, we can save however many FTEs worth of time. And our FTEs, we're paying this crazy bill. You can see your labor cost. It's always a very large, in fact, almost always the dominant segment of any kind of cost breakdown of a business. And you can get labor cost savings. The two things I think often happen, which is quite interesting, is we don't actually see the labor cuts occur. So at the moment, most organizations are not cutting labor when they're automating these things. That's probably a good thing. I don't want anyone to lose their job. I'm not upset about that at all. But what they're saying is, as we lower the cost of servicing this component of our business, we expand our capacity. So now we can take on more customers without increasing our customer services costs, for example. So that's a really positive thing. the more imaginative way to look at it is in the expanding revenue lens, right? And this is quite a cool one because there are a lot of angles to it. One that's quite easy is just looking at where is your revenue coming from at the moment. So can you do more marketing more cost effectively? Can you do more targeted marketing to individual customer segments? If you have a sales team, can you equip them with automation tools to take the paperwork and the drudgery and the commercial admin off of their plate so they're spending more time with customers? So each account manager, say, doubles their roster of managed accounts and sells more while being the same, headcount or the same labor overhead. Or even better yet, right? Often salespeople are not all made equal, and the best will do far more than the average, And so if you could get your best person to have no admin overheads and they are doubling their effort, right? If your best salesperson doubles, that might be better than hiring 2 more salespeople, right? And so those kinds of things are really exciting. I think there's a lot of opportunity to grow the pie and not just kind of cut costs. Because another way to look at this, right, is if you think of what GDP actually measures, right, it is the total monetary value of all produced goods within a country in a given period of time, usually a year, right? That number shrinks if we just all cut costs. If everyone just spends less and everyone's paid less and there are less jobs, GDP shrinks as a result of AI. It does not grow. So if we want to actually take a lens that we are expanding the economy and we're making things better for everyone and people are getting more services and more quality of life, then lowering the cost of services by automating parts of them is great. But then you also have to think of ways to distribute those services out to more people. So it is a bit of a paradox. Like it's a bit of a challenging one to say that we want more productivity, more growth, more activity, and do it all for less. But hopefully that's kind of where we can trend if we use the tool correctly.
Where I guess it becomes about efficiency rather than cutting costs, like synonyms for the same thing, but a slightly different way of looking at it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I think ultimately we'll find that a lot of these tools become kind of table stakes, like all of the organizations have the same thing, and then they start to compete with one another on costs, and then they start to compete with one another on service quality. And so you have this differentiation of, hey, do you double down on having the best customer service at the same price, or do you just double down on cutting cost and making your price as low as possible? And that hopefully also gives people more options. Do you pay the same price you're paying today for something and have a better experience, or because of your current situation, do you want to actually lower your cost of living? And I think a lot of people would like having that optionality.
Cool. So if we cut through the noise around the return on investment and what companies are looking for as far as getting that return, what do you see, or what have you seen in the past as a realistic time frame that people can expect for that return on investment to take to manifest?
Yeah, it's so variable, but it's really interesting actually that the kind of the longer plays have the bigger payoff, and that's usually the way things are. But I think also interestingly, kind of valid to see that as being a risk. So I'll give 2 examples, right, of a very short-term win and a very long-term one. So a short-term win is we've worked with organizations that have had a real focus on driving efficiency in a major cost, which might be customer services. So you can see you've got a call center of, let's say 500 people, keep the numbers kind of easy, and you can lower their average call handling time by like 1 minute. That means that you can, for every call that those 500 people are handling, you're saving like 500 minutes for every like call cycle that you might have in a day. And they set these averages of like the average staffer should handle 20 or 30 calls in a day. So what that means is you're saving 20 to 30 minutes by simply lowering that call handle time. And you might say, well, how does AI lower call handle times? Wouldn't it just be automating it or not automating it? And there's a number of things you can do, right? So it breaks down as in the call, you're taking a question in, you're finding relevant information, checking policy documents, understanding the current state, checking for alerts that might apply to this user around service outages and things like that. And you're relaying that information to the customer. Then on the tail end of the call, you're taking a bunch of actions, writing down notes, filling things in, entering their information into a request form, actioning something on their account, modifying some attribute. And on both ends of that, you can do a lot to automate things. So you can serve information to them better. That's your classic kind of like RAG-assisted chatbot. You're just uploading your company's knowledge and making that available to the person in the call center. And on the tail end, the post-call actions, you can automate a bunch of that too. And collectively, you can get those savings of a couple of minutes, a minute to a couple of minutes per call per employee. And so that winds up being an absolutely massive factor, by the way. This is truly in the several millions of dollars per year for these organizations that can have a successful deployment of that type of solution. So that's short term, right? That doesn't take long to make. You spin up a chatbot in a couple of weeks, and then you iterate on that chatbot. You get a lot of feedback. You test it with a small user group. You run a pilot. You continue to iterate. Like, let's say you get it running in the first month. You do want to iterate for another 3 to 4 to get a really good solution that you trust, and that's just best practices. And then on the post-call summary side, you can do post-call summaries, simple actions, extraction of information and entry into forms and fields very quickly. That's the low-hanging fruit. And then the more complex stuff is like taking actions on their account, and there's issues there around security, and then you want to take that one a little bit slower, but you can still knock off the post-call note taking very, very quickly. So all up, that's like a 6 to 8 month program of work that pays itself off within the same 6 to 8 months. Like, it's almost paid itself off by the time you're done, because the deployment of that pilot is already saving you time. By the time you hit wrap and you're finished iterating on the chatbot, you've already saved 6 months worth of hundreds and hundreds of hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the long term, totally different angle to be taken is looking at your whole business model and really saying, what could this look like with hyper automation? So, great example is one that we have an amazing case study on publicly with Techion. Really awesome, a New Zealand company. So very close with them, and have been working with them for about 3 years now. And the real magic of what these guys do is that they took a completely manual process of pipetting out a sample from like an agricultural context, testing for parasites. And what used to happen was you'd pipette that out, you'd take the sample, you'd ship that off to a lab. That would take several days. The analysis in the lab would take like a day. The results would get back to you via email or whatever a day after that. And you'd finally get the result like 5 to 6 days after you took the sample in the first place. So what that means is that the vet who would then treat the animal for the parasites has like 2 farm visits to make. They're 6 days delayed. They can't find the same animal twice unless they've got really good ear tagging systems and things like that. And so they can't do precision agriculture. They can't treat the right animal for that condition in the right dose and the right amount. So they do what's called herd drenching. They literally just treat every animal in the herd with the same amount if they hit some threshold of parasitic load within the population. And Techion, without our help, before AI, transformed that whole process. So they introduced a digital microscope where you could take that sample and analyze it on the farm, and you'd digitally send up the image of the sample, and their team of annotators who are fantastic and really precise would get you that result back within like 2 to 3 hours. So super, super quick. That would let you treat the animal within the same day, but it would still be kind of too slow to do it while the animal's right in front of you. So you can't get quite the same outcome there. You still also have, in terms of like labor costs and material costs, the cost of the pipette and the sample vial and the all of these things, and the human's time, that human labor to mark up the test and validate that. So it's not really transformative in the kind of operating model yet, but it is a huge improvement over the manual process. So they had great success with that globally, and they're doing fantastically. All we introduced to that was a great AI model. We did not change their business model. We did not revolutionize how they operated in any meaningful way. But with that AI model, what they were able to do is obviously, make some time savings. So give people results in like 6 to 12 seconds, which is huge and really exciting for the veterinary context. They can kind of treat the animal while they're still in front of them. They can improve to that precision agriculture point. By getting that precision agriculture treatment, they can now lower the cost of the medication that they're actually giving out. And then on the Techion side, right, they didn't lay off any staff. They've kept all of their annotators. And what they've done instead is say, well, what else can we do with this technology? Where else can we apply this technology of doing these like microscopy tests with this remote device? And I'm not going to spoil their business plans, but there's a lot of ways you want to look at the world of microscopy, right? There's environmental sampling, there's human health sampling, there's other types of bacterial sampling in animals, and you can look at that as like now this wide open landscape where they can kind of start a flywheel of, we can automate this test and then take our whole team of annotators and start doing this next test, build up a data set, train a model, deploy a model, do it for the next test, the next test, the next test, and they build up this library of really, really performant and accurate models that they can now serve more cost effectively, faster, more conveniently, more accurately than anyone else. So that's transformative, right? But that is the result of like decades of their own technology development. They have an incredible data framework around how they manage data, and that they were built and primed, I guess, to be able to use AI because of that established technology kind of foundation that they had. And then there was also another 3 years of iterating on the technology of the AI with us. And there's still improvements coming to that model around custom neural architecture, custom training framework, custom kind of integration with their process around how things are handled. So there's a lot of tuning in that niche domain. But when it's worth it, it's worth it. It's super transformative.
Yeah, it's been awesome getting to know the Techion guys and seeing how they've taken that one core idea and then grown it, and it kind of spins up bigger and bigger and bigger. Really, really excited to see what happens with that.
They're actually, just a shout out to them, such an amazing team. Seems so small, but you walk through their office and it's like a wet lab right next to a hardware lab where they're making these custom microscopes right next to a software team where they've got their own data infrastructure, and then they've got it's just phenomenal. It's such a cool.
It's a team that's doing it. Right? They're getting there and they're doing it. So what I'm hearing is that the whole cutting costs, the simple cutting costs, actually, yes, really, really, really worth doing. You can see really quick return very quickly. And everyone should be thinking about what they can do there with AI and in the short term. But where the real advantages are gained in the long term is thinking a little bit larger with what is AI capable of? What does AI change fundamentally about how we approach what we do, and how can we leverage that in a unique way that's going to give us a competitive advantage over someone who's not doing that? Is that fair? Is that kind of what you're saying? Or
I think that's basically it. And to give that same kind of draw that analogy back again, right? Of how did the internet change thing? I think before the internet, there was the computer revolution in general, right? And the whole foundation of Microsoft was actually on this idea that software was being treated like hardware, as this expertly made thing that was incredibly expensive. It was tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a complex bit of software written for your IBM mainframe within your organization to do your specific thing. And really the key insight and the brilliance of the Microsoft business model was, no, software has zero marginal cost. I can control CV this entire code base, stick it on a floppy disk or and I can have it on this new computer for effectively free. It should not cost anything to move ones and zeros around, and the internet only accelerated that. And I think what we're seeing now is we have this approaching a zero marginal cost of intelligence, which is transformative if what you sell is an intelligence service or a knowledge service. So there are going to be really fundamental shifts in what it is you can do with intelligence. Because right now, I would say the other angle to this is, automate what you're doing today, understand your current business process, your current revenue streams and all of this, but also what are you not doing because it would be too expensive to do with humans? Does that open up an entire new angle to how you do services, or how you analyze your business's data, or how you make decisions? Because you're not, you can't afford to do it with a team of 10,000 people where you can spin up 10,000 AI bots and it's only a few $1,000s worth of compute credits.
In our last podcast, you mentioned the whole philosophy of hire AI, don't buy it. How does that apply in these kind of situations that you're talking about, and how should CFOs think about the way that they're investing, or the way that they're preparing themselves mentally for the road, the roadmap ahead?
Yeah, I would just say to the CTOs, it's not the same as old software in that it doesn't always do the same thing twice, and it does have that little bit of randomness, and there's some challenges in there in the development cycle. To the CFOs, it's again not exactly the same as old software in that you can't just buy it off the shelf and run it and it works. And so the answer to both really though is actually you take the learnings from HR, you take the learnings from the ops team, the people doing the work today, which is if you hire someone, you expect them to take 3 to 6 months to get up to speed and to be fully operational in your team. So the moment you deploy the model is their first day at work. And yeah, it does take a lot of effort to get to that first model, but it also costs a lot to hire people. If you look at recruitment costs, not just labor costs, but recruitment costs for a given function, you're going to see it's actually pretty high. And if you say, well, actually, let's treat this AI pilot as a recruitment initiative, and instead of spending $50,000 recruiting 10 people, we're going to spend $50,000 making an AI model that automates the work of 10 people. And then you say, well, what's the cost to onboard 10 people in our team, and see that slow ramp up to them doing, however much work, then you bake that in as the iteration cost, and you can actually mirror that up pretty well. You can kind of literally hire AI in the sense that you transfer those costs over and run basically the same program of first acquire, then onboard, then integrate, and then all the while give a lot of feedback and have a really kind of dynamic iteration loop with the delivery team and with the AI model, and set that up in a way that it can advance as the tools advance. So you can move to the next model as it gets smarter and things like that.
Yeah, in that vein, the cost of compute's coming down, the cost of like the smarter models are coming down, or I guess as we get new frontier models, the thing that was the frontier model is getting cheaper. So we get more intelligence for less, I guess. How does that change the game, and how do we need to be thinking about that as we plan for the future?
So it does totally change the kind of core equation for ROI, right? If you want to do the maths on this, exercise for the reader, ROI is the value generated minus the cost, the operating cost of that thing divided by CapEx. If you look at all of those different components from an AI lens, the value of the work you're doing is simply the amount of time it's saving times the labor cost of that time. So it saves you an hour, you're paying the person $50 an hour, just saved you $50. That's great. That is going up, right? As the model gets smarter, if it used to be writing you a draft that you had to spend 20 minutes to fix, and that draft gets better and you only have to spend 15 minutes to fix it, that's doing more work for you in a relative cost sense. Then on the labor cost side of it, or the operational cost side of it, as you said, the models are getting cheaper, that cost of the model is coming down. And so that's, again, improving that whole top end of that equation. And the CapEx side is also coming down because more and more use cases can be solved by off-the-shelf tools or by simple modules that you kind of plug and play together. Or in the case that you are still building something from scratch, the models are getting smarter at coding. So they're getting smarter at building solutions to problems, including AI solutions, right? So I'm more and more often finding myself building a solution to solve a problem because it's more convenient to me. If I want to orchestrate an agent to do something that used to be a several week-long task, it can now be a couple of day-long task, and then I can reuse that agent to solve that problem again in the future. And that's becoming a cheaper and cheaper proposition. So eventually, all of those are trending in the right direction, that we're seeing this increase in value, decrease in operational cost, decrease in capital expenditure, and you're just, all of those trends are heading in the right direction. That can encourage people to wait and just say, well, hey, it's going to keep becoming a better and better offer. Why don't I just wait 6 months and then my ROI is going to be, in the bag and totally locked in. But I think what people often miss is the kind of hidden associated cost CapEx. So the hidden associated CapEx would be, for example, that you need a good data platform before you build something that integrates with your data. We can go into the nuances of that maybe another time. But what I mean to say is that it's going to remain fairly expensive to set up a great data platform and integrate with every different data source. And again, the intelligent coding tools might make that easier over time, but they're not going to eliminate it completely in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So it is much better for you if you want to keep up with competitors and you want to stay on that frontier to actually start doing things now, figure out what's hard, build supporting infrastructure, build common infrastructure, build change management practices, right? Build a framework to adopt these solutions, build the skill set around defining good evaluation metrics so that you can test what you build, right? Because all of that stuff is going to be learnings you're just kicking down the road. You're going to have to engage in all of that stuff eventually. And if you're engaging with it 2 to 3 years after everyone else, that's not going to be a super fun experience if you're playing catch up, I don't think.
Yeah, it sounds like from my perspective, it feels like companies are going to live or die based on how they respond in the next 3 years, or how they set themselves up. Like competitive advantage is being built now.
Yeah.
And if you wait, because it might get cheaper, it might get cheaper, but you might not be really poised to take advantage of what's ahead if you haven't got the foundation set up. Would you agree with that? Would you challenge that?
Yeah, some companies. Yeah, I don't think like mining companies are going to live and die based on how they adopt Copilot tomorrow, right? And and that's just depends on where you're operating. But if like the core of your cost model is, we've got customer services, we've got back of house billing and processing, and we've got the core service that we provide to our customer, and your cost model kind of breaks down around these like big 3 arms of like your front of house, your back of house, and your operations and services. and you can massively automate in your back of house and your customer services sides and lower that cost. If you do that now, you're going to start getting a lot of pure profit from that while you don't have to lower your costs, right? But if your competitor does it and then they lower their costs, you can match them. You have that optionality to lower costs and still be, fine. But if you have, say, 5 people in the market and you do it, your competitor does it, you lower price, and 3 others didn't engage in that optimization, well, now their entire operation is losing money and they have this massive bill coming down the road. If they want to stay in the game, now they have to change everything. So it becomes a really tough proposition for them to play catch up. And that's not trying to, I guess, spread fear. It's just, I guess, rational positioning. If the market shifts, you want flexibility.
Yeah. Last podcast, you mentioned that I think it was 95% of pilots fail. How do people avoid that? How do companies looking for ROI set themselves up to build the foundations they need to see that ROI and to start start building the dream?
So I mean, the 100% read the report is my because the answers are in there is my biggest piece of guidance. Like, please, if it is your job to make decisions about AI within a major organization, that's such a good report. And the reason I'm not challenging it and the reason I'm saying yes, I agree 95% of pilots are failing is because it's true by their methodology. Now, the nuance in that methodology is quite interesting, right? So one thing was that if you literally one change, if you just say 95% of pilots are failing, great. 33% of pilots are succeeding if they have a business plan, right? The only difference between that massive margin that all failed and having 33% success rate is just actually having a plan and applying it in a specific area to a specific problem with some amount of validation that there is ROI to be had if it's successful, right? So a real internal initiative with a business plan, with an applied area of focus, jumps up to 33%. Even more shockingly than that, if you engage with outside support and expert support, that number jumps up to 67%, right? So you're basically going up from a 1/3 success rate to a 2/3 success rate. If you just make a plan and then talk to someone who knows how to implement that plan. And it's the 2 most basic things you could possibly imagine, and you jump up to over 50% chance of success.
Right.
And when we're talking about programs that are let's just for the sake of conversation, let's say it's $200,000 to $300,000 to build these solutions, and that's actually on the high end. They can often be a fair bit cheaper. If you're saying it's $200,000 to $300,000 to have a shot at saving $2 to $3 million, that's worth it.
Those are good odds.
That's pretty. I'd hit that button most of the time, or I'd pull that lever off the jackpot.
Especially if you had 10 opportunities to pull that lever.
Exactly. Yeah. So the law of large numbers. The more good opportunities you can find that are aligned to major cost centers, if you can make a good plan and it's feasible and it passes those initial kind of filtering conditions I mentioned earlier on. If you've got a filtered idea that has a solid business plan that's tightly aligned to a high value area, and then you engage expertise, it's keep pulling that lever. You're gonna hit eventually.
So you talk about the importance of having a good data platform in place. Are there any other considerations that people need to consider that may not be so obvious that you would say is integral or help support a successful outcome?
Yeah, there are certainly some key pillars. So I guess underlying all of it, under the pillars, the foundational layer is just having good kind of digital infrastructure, networking, security, kind of cloud infrastructure. That just lets you deploy things with confidence and actually have good standards set and things to conform to and understand the right naming conventions and architectural processes and review processes and things like that. And that really lets you kind of experiment with a little bit less fear. So I think laying that foundation is critical. On top of that, you do want to set up a data platform. So a means of integrating all of your data into one location with consistent naming schemes and storage schemas and interfaces to that data. And specifically, beyond this, and I think it's worth an entire podcast, is actually talking about data warehousing versus data lake housing. So data lake housing is not just a nice place to go on holiday. It's actually saying a data lake is an open storage format. So you can store any document type in there. A data warehouse only stores, row and file, and a row and column, data in a tabular data structure. In a data lakehouse, you can have all of your documents, you can have all your videos, you can have audio recordings, Teams transcripts, anything like that is not going to fit into that columnar data structure. And you can make use of that as if it were a structured, indexed piece of data. So I think that's critical. So you want a data lakehouse. You also need good change management processes, right? So this is, like we've talked about, you want to integrate what you're doing with the COO. You want the operations team to understand that, hey, operations will change. We're going to change a process. We're going to replace a process. We're going to advance a process. And how do we do that? How do we retrain the team? How do we introduce the tool so it's not scary? It's not taking their jobs. It's enabling, it's augmenting, it's advancing, it's whatever. The other really critical things are having executive buy-in. So this was actually, again, called out in that report from MIT that one of the major contributors to failure cases was just a lack of executive support. It was kind of shadow IT testing something out. It was middle management taking a stab at something, but not integrating that leadership lens. So by the time they're hearing about it, they're predisposed to saying, no, shut it down. It's too risky. Right. It's not their idea.
Yeah.
So if you're in the middle management area, maybe, managing up a little bit, try to make it their idea. So they're backing it and they want it to succeed, and it will reflect positively on them if it succeeds. And then you get that kind of momentum behind it. So that's quite critical. If you've got those kind of pillars in place and you've got good kind of responsible AI policies, and you're not doing anything that's going to jeopardize the business, and you've actually identified a whole bunch of opportunities and applied the filtering that I said before, so you've got good business cases. And actually, in AI policies, I think are kind of overly focused on what do we restrict and not really focused on how do we evaluate opportunities to improve. So if you want to improve your AI policy today, I think a really critical thing you can add to it is literally just having a opportunity evaluation framework, right? And that's not a hard thing to do. You can scope that out in about 2 pages and just say, hey, how do we identify, how do we validate new opportunities so that if we have a great idea, we can run it through this system. And if it passes those checks, it's put on the table for consideration by leadership.
Maybe we should pull the lever on this particular problem.
Exactly. Yeah. So is it feasible? Is it low risk? Is it worth doing? Does it have high ROI? Those kind of basic checks and balances. And then does it have any kind of dependent critical infrastructure that we don't have in place? And if it ticks all of those boxes, that it's worth doing, and it only depends on stuff you already have in place, so it can be done with today's state, doesn't require a whole technology roadmap, that's usually a good one to shoot for. And like I said, you can spell that out in less than 2 pages, and people kind of get the gist of it.
Given that, if a listener's not terribly clear on exactly how to identify what makes a good ROI case, do you have like a simple framework that they can just steal and just put into the AI policy right now?
We do, in the sense that we've written that down for a number of people. We have a whole evaluation framework that we run as kind of a larger consultative, multi-day, multi-step kind of thing, where we produce a report. I think what that's focused on is ticking all of the boxes, and sometimes you don't need to tick every box all at once. So what we try to do is actually understand, by talking to the executives, what level of buy-in they have. By talking to the ops team, what would it look like to change this process? And are you willing to engage in that change management? And what change management frameworks do you have in place? Do you have a learning management system? If you were to change things, if you update the documents in one location, is that a single source of truth, or will pockets of the organization keep doing things the old way? How well can you govern, and how quickly can you steer the ship? And then separately, we talk to the digital team, so we understand their security environment, their data environment, the kind of maturity of their data ecosystem to integrate different data sources, what kind of checks and balances are in place, and also kind of what roadblocks are we going to hit with architecture review boards or responsible AI policies, and those checks and considerations that are very much worth having in the picture, but do ultimately slow things down. And what that lets us do is have a very rich picture of how long is this going to take if we do a given solution, right? Not to say get rid of those checks and balances, but purely to be realistic about timelines, so they're not projecting something will land in a quarter, lands 2 quarters later, they mark it as a failure, even though it succeeded, but just on a more realistic timeline. With that, we also map out opportunities in a lot of detail. And then what we do with an opportunity matrix is really what I'm suggesting is your evaluation framework, as we try to mark down for every opportunity being a row, we have a column for the perceived risk, both reputational risk and just risk of failure. The technology is not ready. A kind of a feasibility score. a cost score, what we think it's going to cost to deliver, and then what we think of as being the time horizon to deliver it. And then we also have a column for every prerequisite dependent technology. So if this system depends on them having a good data platform, we mark that down. If it depends on them having a bunch of OpenAI quota, say, we mark that down. If it depends on them training a whole new model from scratch on their own data, we mark that down. So you end up with this matrix where you can then say, well, if we attach our business value as a final column to that, what we actually think it's going to be worth for us in the end of the day, and we eliminate everything that depends on a new piece of technology, and it's within this cost framework and it's high ROI, that's your low-hanging fruit. You can get those today. And then you can start to turn on those dependent technology columns in a way that starts to unlock new opportunities. So you say, well, hey, 7 out of 10 opportunities here depend on a good data platform, and 4 of those 7 are really high ROI. If we had all of those land, that kind of justifies building a better data platform. So let's put that on our technology roadmap, modernize the data platform, and then in 8 months' time, we'll work on those opportunities. So not just looking at what you can do today, but actually understanding that whole holistic business picture of what it would look like to transform in the long term.
Right. So it's not so much an ROI measure on a single item, but like, hey, let's look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
What's our path to ROI?
Yeah.
Or where is it worth putting the money? Where do we need to actually invest in order to have a roadmap, an AI roadmap?
Yeah. A roadmap beyond AI, I would say. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'd also emphasize, right, like the evaluation framework you can put on 2 pages. That whole assessment it's never 2 pages, right? It's a 30 plus page document every time. So I would just say you can get a lot of the way there by just improving and tightening up policies and putting common sense strategies in place here and there. But if you do want that more holistic, more extensive thing, that's something to engage in. Like that's something to really think about doing properly and getting the right people in the room and having real conversations and building out a strategy document that kind of cohesively looks at that bigger picture.
Cool. If you had one thing that you'd like the audience to remember or take away, if this was all a big blur and they want to remember one thing that we probably should just put at the beginning of the podcast, what would that be?
I think we did put it at the beginning of the podcast.
Well,
that's what we started with.
How thoughtful of us.
Yeah, I think you should try to increase your top line revenue while lowering your bottom line costs. I think that you can do both, and I think that unless we want AI to be a GDP shrinking technology, if we want to grow the pie for everyone, we need to focus on how we can make more, not just do less.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll leave it on that note.
Cheers.
Thanks for having a chat with us again, and we'll see you again next time.
Always great to talk. Thanks.